Good morning. I'll talk a little bit about like what Template Toolkit is, I guess, to start. We didn't talk about that part, Barbara. We had exactly one email where we planned a little bit.
Yeah.
This morning. But don't worry, we both know what we're talking about. So Template Toolkit is a option for the notices, and new Template Toolkit or new notices are only written in Template Toolkit, whereas the old ones were written with the hungry alligators at the beginning and end for putting in information from Koha. And Template Toolkit is newer and it provides a lot more options without having to use jQuery, which sometimes doesn't run as well and makes it harder to like go longer before it prints. And also it's possible with Template Toolkit to call in more information, a lot more information than the hungry alligators provide. And so I have most of the Template Toolkit stuff that I've done so far has been in the hold notices, the hold available for pickup, and the hold slip. And I showed off the hold slip in the every other Thursday video that I guest starred in March, May, last spring. But I'm gonna also show that off for people who haven't seen it and for people who, well, and because we've made some changes. So, but first I'm also gonna do the hold available for pickup email, which I recently revamped. We have a new, it's like a subscription box that we're doing called Something For Ya. Books out of the YA department. It's once a month and they're like themed, like this month, the one for October, which the sign up was this month. It's YA books. You can pick like a Halloween theme or not. And then it's like a fall theme. And it comes with a book that's picked by our youth services librarian, something to eat, something to keep, like a little toy or something. And I forget what the fourth thing is. But the book is a surprise. It's in the box. And so they said, hey, can we write the email notice so it won't say what is in the box? So I said, yeah, we can do that. So I said, well, okay, if the reserve note says Something For Ya, and she just copies and pastes that in, I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself. All the Template Toolkit is done within these open bracket parentheses or percent sign at the beginning and percent sign end bracket here. And then you can do if then statements. So if the reserve notes equals Something For Ya and borrower other names exists, isn't blank, which I've been doing on all our notices because we use that for nicknames, and also like we keep whatever's on people's driver's licenses in the first name field, but we'll put in other names for nicknames or if they have, a preferred name. So I've been doing that whenever I'm updating a notice, making sure that it says dear other names if they have it, which mostly works really well. We do have a few staff members who have like 3 or 4 digit codes or letter codes to easily pull up their account. And so then they're getting notices that are like, dear ZZK, instead of dear whatever your name is. And then it'll say your Something For Ya box is ready, information. The barcode for the book is listed on the front of the box. And that's the only part we need back. And then I do it again for if they don't have other names. I could also do like a second if else statement, just have one Something For Ya and have a dear if borrower's other name, then print that, otherwise print for borrower's first name. But I was just trying to get this functioning because they asked me about it about 12 hours before we needed to have the notices going out. So I just did it this way because it reflected from some other code I already had. Then I also decided to say, well, if if it's this specific biblio number, then that's going to be our interlibrary loan holds. And it works similarly to someone else who was mentioning their ILL holds, where we have one record, and then we put the name of the book that is on loan in the like non-public notes field. And so our ILL guy was like, hey, it would be great if we could have the title of the book show up in the email. And so I was like, yeah, that would be great. So I have it for the title, I have it pull the non-public note instead of the title field, because that's where we're putting the title for our ILL books. And instead of saying like item information here, oh God, I'm not sharing my screen, am I? Have I just been talking without sharing my screen?
No, we can see your IDE, it looks like, whatever you're using there. So we see your code. Is that what you're wanting us to see?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Or just, usually it has the like green line around where you're sharing screen, and I just got this. I was like, I don't see that. Am I not sharing my screen and just standing here talking about the code? Okay. So that way we can have the title in for patrons instead of just like ILL number 43. So that's more helpful for our patrons. And then we have, so that's the other ILL, same thing, other name versus not other name. And then we just have, otherwise, if there's an author, a biblio author, we want to print the author name, this line, but there's not always an author, and people would be like, I'm confused because it says author : and then nothing. I'm like, well, it's a DVD, so there's not an author. But then we have other names, and then just an, oh wait, let's see. Then just an else that's the default hold notice that we've had like forever. Oh, and one thing we do, which I'll talk about this a little more on the hold slip, our holds are self-service since the pandemic. And so our hold slips are the first 3 letters of the last name, first 3 letters of the first name, and then the unique part of the card number. And so we send that in the email so that people know what it's going to look like, as just like a bold, hey, here's what your hold notice looks, or here's how it's going to be done, how it's going to show up on the slip, on the hold slip. And then, yeah, so that's our hold slips, and I will pull up a couple notices, or our hold notices, hold available notices, and I'll pull up a couple to show what they look like when they print. But I'm also gonna, well, yeah, okay, let me just pause share so I can get to those real quick without personal information. Okay. So, does anyone have any questions so far? I see that Barbara put some links in the chat, notices with Template Toolkit on the wiki, how that's like a how-to kind of information, and then
it's all kinds of examples, talks about, kind of what Template Toolkit is, gives you some background and gives you lots of examples. And then there's some prior presentations that also are good references.
Yes.
I was about to ask about the wiki when I noticed that Barbara put it up there. There is a library for notices. And so my question now is this notice available in the wiki yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
I should. That would be good.
I think it'd be great because it looks like a really good notice.
Yeah, this one I just did like at the start of this month, so it's pretty new. The other one I'm going to show is mostly on there. I have made a couple of changes, but mostly it is not, sorry, I copied and pasted the notice into a Word document and I'm just cleaning it up a little bit because it copied kind of weird. Okay, so this is, oh, where's my screen share go? Zoom share. Okay, so you should be able to see a Word document now. Dear Lisette, we're pleased to still be offering curbside hold one day. These notices, my notices are HTML because that's how they were set up before. All of our notices had lots of HTML and some jQuery also. Oh yeah, so that's one important thing is when you're editing the notices, you have to check that they have HTML in the, there's like a checkbox for it. But you can use HTML tags, you know, like these have strong tags. And we have some information about a lot of information about our curbside here. This is what that looks like when it truncates everything. Oh, I guess it's 2 letters of the first name, but if you truncate it to 2, it really just does like first letter, comma, so you have to truncate it to 3. And then title, author, since this one has an author, we put the location in because we're part of a 48 branch consortium, and the address. And I think also the phone number is on there, and I deleted it when it pasted into Word, it had a bunch of much larger spaces than it needed to. And so just like the something for you box has a much shorter hold notice that just talks about that instead and where you can pick it up. And yeah, so in the Sublime text here, you know, this is all HTML tags, break, paragraphs, and you can do all sorts of HTML that way. All sorts of formatting. So mostly they're fairly basic, you know, just like paragraphs and stuff to make it look nice. Yeah, so where do you put the template toolkit code? So that would be in tools, notices and slips, and then like this is the whole, let's see, hold available for pickup email. You would edit it. I put everything in the email. There we go. You do have to check HTML message if you have any HTML. And then you just put it in here. These alligators are, or these automatically insert like alligator tags, which don't, some of the newer notices, the alligator tags don't actually work in. And then, and it's kind of annoying that the template toolkit, you can't do it, you know, branches.branch code and just insert it in, especially since it's a little different. If you notice here in the template toolkit, it's like borrowers other names instead of, or borrower singular other names instead of borrowers other names, which is what it's been. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't think any of the tables in template toolkit have the S on the end. They're all singular, unless there's like 1 or 2. There might be some weird ones, but none of the main ones that you use, you know, hold for hold related info, borrower for patron info, branch for branch stuff, biblio for biblio information. Those are all part of it. If you have, I highly recommend testing these notices either on a test server if you have them, because even if emails aren't being sent, you can still see them on my, or on like your patron information where you can see the past notices, even if it's not like actually emailing out, or when you're not open, because otherwise what happens is you like try to fill a hold, especially with slips. You like try to fill a hold and then you get an internal server error because something's wrong. Missing a space, have an extra bracket somewhere. TJ also asked in the chat, do I need to have Template Toolkit enabled on my server, or is this part of Koha that I never saw before? Yeah, it's just part of Koha. I think all the notices and slips now can use it. I don't think there's any that you can't use it for anymore. And new stuff, you can only use Template Toolkit. So if you go into like a new notice and go to edit it, you'll see that it's all written in Template Toolkit. So, and then my other, over here. My other slip is hold slip, which this is a little bit more going on. So we're part of a consortium, so our hold slips also have to be transfer slips for holds going to other branches. And there's some modules. Oh, George mentioned do and predue digests can't use Template Toolkit for item or biblio information. You still have to use the like items content or whatever it's called in there. And we haven't messed with the do and predue notices digests very much with Template Toolkit yet. So there's a few modules in Template Toolkit that we have in Koha. One of them is branches. If you're using these modules, which there's a list of them on the Template Toolkit notices and slips link that Barbara shared. You can use branches. You just need to call them at the beginning of your notice so that they can be used properly. And I don't actually remember what the branch is. Yeah, you can combine Template Toolkit code with the hungry alligators. So like when we were first updating our slips, you know, I do like, if they have another name, print that instead, but everything else was still hungry alligators. So if you want to just update certain things, but not like totally overhaul your notices, you can do it a little bit at a time. So this says if the hold branch code doesn't equal, just like with SQL, you could do like doesn't equal, and a lot of these are in the documentation that was linked, and I'm also working on a resource guide for Template Toolkit. So if the hold branch kit doesn't equal Moscow, then we print the hold branch that it's going to and hold, and a little bit of item information and where the slip was generated at. And we have a bunch of list items in there to make the slip longer so that it'll actually fit in the book, but not very long, just long enough that it'll fit in an item for courier, not all falling out. And then we have some other stuff going on here. We say, well, if it's Moscow and the borrower is this borrower number, then it's something that got put on hold because there's a problem with it and it needs to go to mending. So instead of making our staff members cancel the hold, fill out a different slip of paper, we do still have them cancel the hold, but we have them print the slip, and it just prints us a mending slip that says mending, initials, when it was sent to mending on. And this is using that Koha dates where you can make it format into the US date time, which I think that one just formats into like month, day, year, no time when it's US like that. And then any notes, hold reserve notes. And that's usually, we'll put a reserve note in saying what the problem is when we place the hold. So this just means less clicks and less like having to write out a bunch of stuff when it's already all part of Koha, and then a bunch of list items. We also have accounts for various borrowers. You know, Lisa's the access services manager. Connie's also one of the, she's not the manager, but she works in access services and often puts stuff on hold for projects. Outreach holds for our outreach person. Most of these are pretty much the same, but just, you know, story time for Stacy's, our youth services librarian. Each of our tech people has a card or a couple cards for putting things on hold. And again, we want to change it to Mendon, but this way it can go straight to the person that it's going to, because they already know that that's who's going to handle it. And then, oh, and I guess I just should have explained that better. If the whole branch code equals Moscow, and you have to do this double and to make it work, and this double equals sign here, and the borrower number equals this, or that's what the two pipes are, is they'll say, or the borrower number equals that. So it has to be one of those two things for it to print this slip. And it has to be a whole branch in Moscow. And part of the reason we have it like that is because we use basically the same slip across the branches. And so just to make sure that if someone's filling one of these holds at a branch, it's printing the transfer slip correctly and not trying to overwrite it and print this. And then for staff holds, since we have self-service holds, we changed the staff hold slips a little bit. So they say staff hold at the top and have our first name instead of having like a truncated name, because those aren't going out into self-service. And then, so this section is just for the top portion of the slip. So the, is it a staff hold or, oh yeah, so koha dates format US, and then we truncate it to 6, and that tells us how long we'll hold it for. So the hold expiration date, and then the single pipe is like a formatting, pulling modules thing. There's a few different things you can do with it, like the truncate, which is just a template toolkit function, or pulling like the koha dates format and how you want to format it. And truncate just means it'll only be 6 digits, which we don't need the year. So I think it's like, 2-digit month / 2-digit year, and then that's 5, and then like a space on the end. And so then, yeah, that's for our first name, or this truncating the, last name, first name, card number. And then if it's just Moscow and doesn't have either an SMS alert number or an email address in, we have it print a slightly different slip, because we set those aside and call the patron and write down the hotel date while we have stamp. And so that way we can see that we need to set it aside to call them, because they don't have an SMS alert number or an email. And we tell our patrons that when they're signing up, that if they have either of those things, they're not going to get a phone call, even if they have notices turned off. And that's also, we have like some jQuery on our OPAC, so that they see that if they go in and try and change it, they know that they won't be getting notices, which some of our people like, they don't want to get a call when they get a hold, and they don't necessarily care about getting an email because they're in like 5 days a week anyway. Coming to read the paper in the morning, and if there's a hold, they'll just check when they're in. And then this one. That was different. If whole branch equals Moscow. Oh yeah, so this was, if these are those same staff cards. That, right. Yeah. Because of the way we put the information in here that they need, they don't necessarily need the book title and stuff in there, because it goes straight to them. So we said, if the whole branch code is Moscow and the borrower number is not any of those staff cards that are used for projects, then print the item info. And then this is like the bottom section where the transfer gets more list items. And if it's, or it gets the transfer hold for like the bottom of the slip. Else, if the branch code is Moscow and we don't need to call them, print some more list items so that it's a little bit longer. And then this is our phone the patron checklist. And so this is, you know, we called them, here's their phone number, here's their actual first name. So when we call, we know that we're not just calling like LI, because that's all the patron information we had before. And then did we speak with the patron? Did we leave a message with someone else or with the answering machine, or we had to send a postcard, just so we have that information if someone's like, I never heard from you. And I'm gonna just pause share again real quick to pull up some of these example, what they look like as slips. And does anyone have any questions so far? So this is what like a staff hold outreach looks like, where it's got smaller staff hold, who it's for. This was from before I set a separate outreach one. Item on hold information. This is those like sent to tech and who it's going to, where we can put the initials in. Let's see. This is our mending one. And then this is what they look like for regular self-serve holds and phone the patron self-serve holds. Or yeah. So let's see. Wally asked, is there a way to see the results before sending it live? So for some things it is. Like for the hold slip, there's data for preview, and then you can hit preview. So you'd have to put in like a patron borrower number and a hold that they have. Here, wait, let me pause here real quick, and I will put in, I have a hold waiting, so I can do that for me. We'll see. I haven't actually done this because it never seems to work for me, but and also I have a test server, so I usually just test it in there, where I can, it doesn't matter if I break it for a little while. Oh, and here's the thing. If you're overhauling your notices or even just making a couple changes, I would always copy out what functions into Notepad, or like I use Sublime Text Editor. And so you have what worked and leave that one alone, so that if you break it and you need to get it functional again, or you need to be like, what did I delete? You know, with these, you could do it even like a split view side by side so you can see what was different. But so you would put in the biblio number and then a pipe and borrower number, and you'd hit preview. And I don't think the HTML always renders properly. I think sometimes you see, yeah, you see the HTML tags. But any of the template toolkit stuff should work. And the other thing you can do too is you can use the demo sites if you don't have a test server and want to just mess around with it, because as you can see, it takes forever to load the previews, at least sometimes. Sometimes it'll come up right away, but then it always looks weird when it comes up that fast to me. Yeah, it's like still loading. I mostly don't use this function because we have a test server. And also I work before we're open, so sometimes I'll work on it in the live server and I'll just call like whoever is working before we open and be like, please don't fill any holds. I'm messing with the slips. And then I just do it a bunch that way. Or try to get in there before anyone else, like work at 7 instead of 8. And no one who's filling holds is going to be in the building. So Well, as you can see, this takes a long time, so it isn't maybe the easiest way to see the results before sending it live. One more thing I'm going to mention is that in the update that's coming this fall, well, the update for Bywater customers, if you're self-hosted, you might already be on 2105, but you'll be able to use Template Toolkit in the message subject too. So if, say, you're getting a new library card email sent out, you could put in the subject like, Lisette, welcome to the Latah County Library District, and have it pull that information if you wanted to. I don't know if we're going to do that yet. But maybe for like your card is expiring, we might do, hey, your card's expiring on date. So it's right there in the email and they can see what they need to see that, it has a time and when that time is up. And I'm gonna stop sharing so Barbara can do her thing.
All right. Let's see. I always have problems with sharing my screen, so give me a minute here. Can you see anything? Have I done anything yet? Let's see. There we go. Can you see anything now? A notice?
Yes,
I can see a
looks good.
city of Bedford.
Wonderful. Okay, so that's what we want to look at. So our reason for Template Toolkit, we weren't really looking yet to use it. I wanted to learn more about it, but it wasn't necessarily on my radar yet. But we wanted to make some changes to our printed third overdue notices. So we'd been using the same notice that had been set up in 2016 when we went live. And I'm not really that involved in the overdue process. I don't really see the notices. It's, just not something I'm really involved with too much. So we had a situation where the staff member in circulation was going on vacation and she was showing the circ supervisor, here's what you're going to have to do while I'm gone. And so they went through the whole process and all the steps, and the circ supervisor realized, well, staff was taking a lot of time to sort of add in information, handwrite additional information onto the notice, different things like that. So you can see in this example, I hope you can see it, that there's some handwritten notes in there, like the second title, the Dragon Ball Super. The staff member wrote in that it was part 10. So apparently that must be something where we have, lots of different, editions or volumes or something. And then the Jumanji title, that's a DVD. So it's not just Jumanji, it's actually Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle. So before we send out the notices, staff will search the shelves one last time to make sure, is there for some reason, is it here in the library, before they want to send that printed notice out. And so they were partly writing that information for their own searching, because if you are looking like in the graphic novels section and we put all our volumes of the graphic novel on the one title, you get, just the same title over and over and over again. And it did have the barcode, but it would be really nice to know, well, I'm looking for volume 6 of this particular graphic novel series. So a lot of that was for the staff searching, but it could also be useful information to the patron. They received this notice and it looks like they're getting the same, they're getting an overdue notice and it's printing the same title 20 times, because what does the patron know? It looks like the same thing. So we wanted to add in some additional information, for both the staff and the patron. And then staff was also writing on the notice, some additional, there are no more renewals allowed, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like, well, we could actually put that in the notice. You don't have to sit there and write that on every single notice. So it's like, let's fix this up a little bit. So that was our original notice, and I clicked on it a little bit. Can you see it a little bit bigger? Because I'm not sure how well you can view it. Okay, good. And so we got with Bywater and said, we want to add the subtitle, the 245B, because that was not being brought over into the notice. And we wanted to add the part name or the part number if those existed. So the 245P or the 245N. We wanted to add the volume number because that is often good for the graphic novels and good for our TV series. So the 942H we wanted to add in. And then we also decided to put in the replacement costs of the items, sort of a, you've got all our stuff and look at how much it costs. And we'd really love you to bring all these things back. And then we ended up numbering the items in the list just to give it a little more definition, just so it looked a little bit more professional. So that was all Template Toolkit stuff. So let me see. Are you now seeing something that shows a list of graphic novel things? Okay. So this is a snippet from somebody's notice, and they have checked out a lot of Yona of the Dawn and Hayuki, if I'm saying that correct. And without the Template Toolkit in there, you would not see that they've got volume 3, volume 4, volume 5. They've got all of these. And so when staff would go to the shelf, they didn't know that either. All they had was the barcode. So we wanted to add this information in, so it would be additional information to identify and specify the items. So that's kind of what the graphic novel was like with Template Toolkit. And this is a snippet from somebody that had some Seinfeld DVDs out. So now they can clearly see that not only do they have Seinfeld season 4, but they have the disc 1 of season 4. And previously that was not on the notice. And so then our final notice, this is what it ended up looking like. And I had to kind of do some weird screenshots because I don't have this information in the server anymore. This was all done back in January, and I had to kind of reproduce some stuff. And this one I cobbled together from something this morning. But this is a little bit what the final notice would look like. Ignore that blue bar at the top. That was just a placeholder for our logo that's on our paper that we use. And so we've got the address block and phone. And okay, so third notice, and we give a little information. We've numbered all our results. We've got, all of that stuff in there. And that was the final notice. At the time we did it, we also did a few other cleanups. This original notice had quotes around all the titles, looked kind of weird. So we removed those. It printed the timestamp of the notice date. So here we have a notice date of 1:39 a.m. Who cares? So we removed that. Every title on the due date, it would print the 11:59 p.m. That's just, it's unneeded. So why print it? So we removed that. For some reason, this entire notice was in bold. I don't know why, but we removed it from being all bold and made it a little, I think our final version is a little easier to read. Let's see. There's probably some other things we did, but I think overall, what we ended up with looks a little more professional. There's a little more spacing around things, so it's a little easier to read. And so staff is not writing in additional information. They can easily find things on the shelf. So that was our goal in doing this. I did not really understand Template Toolkit syntax, so I had to get with Lucas at Bywater. My original ticket is we'd like to do these things, and he said, well, you're going to need Template Toolkit to do that. It's like, okay. So he did the original code, and let me see, get to the right place here. So let me tell you about the process, because this is a printed notice, an actual physical print notice. It was a lot more difficult than dealing with like an email notice. We had to go through a lot of testing, and the way we did it was we took our code, and even though the code will originally end up in my Odoo 3 notice, you can use this overdues slip function and go into it and look at the code. You drop the code into that particular notice. This was the best way Lucas told me to test. So I put that in the overdue 3, or I'm sorry, the overdue slip. And so when I had a patron, and here we have our youth services supervisors, got a lot of stuff overdue, I can go into the print and use the print overdues and get an idea of what this notice would look like if it were printed, because I can't really, this is an overdues process. I didn't want to be, just blindly putting code out there and sending notices, and the patrons would be like, half of it's not here. I don't understand it. It's too small. I didn't know what it was going to look like. So he said, this is a good way to simulate what the patron would see. So we did a lot of back and forth of modifying our code and then bringing up a patron and viewing it this way to see, were we hitting the mark on what we wanted this to actually look like. And even though we did all of that and, actually printed them out, when we actually started using it, there were still issues. So this is just it's not a perfect simulation of what it will end up looking like. So there were still a lot of tweaks we ended up having to do. Let's see, cancel that. Okay. And then let's see. I've got a place that shows, okay, here. We originally put the code in the notice into me what was, a viewable, understandable way of looking at what's happening in Template Toolkit. So I could see it was using the koha dates here. I could see the patron block information that I did here with the address and everything. And this is actually a second notice, but let me see, that's probably not the one I want to look at because we want to look at third. Well, I may not have it, but what ended up happening is I did the notice and I made it in a format I could see and understand. And for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure, but Lucas and I went back and forth, and he said, I think we're going to need to minify the code, and that's going to help when it actually renders the print. So there was something going on with, I don't know, spacing or something, but we worked a long time with, using it where I could actually see what was going on. And then we ended up minifying it. So when you look at this code, it's kind of like, well, this is, all together. It's just one big block. And it's really hard to see what's going on. So that was a challenge as well. But I don't completely understand all the mechanics of Template Toolkit, but we accomplished what we wanted. We got additional bib and item information into that notice. I think we made it look nicer. Circulation staff is happy. That's one of the big goals. So that's basically what I wanted to share.
It looks like Hall Library asked on the manga example, would it be possible to have the volume number, money sign N, display next to the title rather than behind the call number?
It would be, and I think, let's see. You can make things in any order. Oops, take, you can put it in any order you want to. And I think there were some things where in testing, we ended up with some, I'm not sure, maybe additional spaces or something that just wasn't exactly where we wanted it to be. And this was how Circ staff wanted it to be, but you can put those fields in any order you want. You could put title last and date first if you wanted to.
What fields are actually available to pull in from the title? Like, are you getting the 245 A, B in and
yeah, it's
B?
245 A, B, the P, which is the part name, I think, the N, which is the part number, and then the author. And then from the item, we're getting the call number, the barcode, and we added in the 942H for the volume. And I think really my feeling would be if I can add in all those fields from the 942 or the 245, you could probably add in any of the subfields that come from there.
Right, because it's pulling from the database, right? So as long as you have that marked field mapped somewhere, then you can
Right.
pull from that field in the database. Okay.
And that was another thing that did happen to us too, is we put the code in and then I was testing the notices and it's like, but I'm not seeing the subfield and I'm not seeing the part name. And it turned out we didn't actually have those mapped correctly. And so they had to do some kind of fix with that. And I don't know, maybe reindex. And then it was like, oh, now the code works. So, there were different back and forths with figuring out this whole process.
There is a list on the wiki, and I'll put a link to the customizing notices and slips page in the Koha community wiki. Gives a list of all the letter codes that are built into Koha, and then it'll tell you what fields are available when you're using that message. So the reason that the overdue slip is a good one to use for testing for the overdue notices is because they're both built by the same script. They're both built by overdues.pl, I think, or overdue notices.pl builds both of those. And so the same set of fields are used in both of those. So you can't use like overdue slip to check out, to test a suggestion notice because they use different fields. But you can use overdue slip to test the overdue notices.
And I think there was something else that happened with, because this is an actual printed notice. I think there was something like a print notices PL or something else that happens when the print happens for these that was also causing a problem that Lucas had to, figure out. It was something that was conflicting coming from somewhere else. So it was interesting, you would think you had it done. And then when you actually started using it, there would be something else that you had to kind of figure out. So it was a long back and forth process, but we finally got there. And the code that Lucas originally sent, it was beautiful because, it had the title on one line and then the author and then to me, it was a lot more readable. But this is a printed notice. And sometimes we have people with 50 items overdue, and that would be lots of sheets of paper. And so we have it printed, it could be more readable. It could be, lines of stuff that's more readable. And this is more readable than our original, but it is still data that's kind of squished together simply because we don't want to send pages and pages and pages of notices. We do want it to be rather concise.
Sorry if my question is jumping topics, but I thought I'd drop it in the chat in case anybody wanted to comment on the answer. I noticed that your fields inside of the template commands, the if commands, don't use those double greater than less than symbols. Borrower number. Am I using the wrong? What am I doing wrong, Lisette?
So it's, if you're using just borrower number instead of borrower number, it's different that way. Template Toolkit, all those tables are like singular tables instead of borrowers, it's borrower. So if you put just like how I put it in the chat, if borrower number equals 3, then that should work. But if you're doing if borrower number outside of the alligators, like without the alligators, then it's not going to know how to pull that. But it's also interesting that you can put the alligators inside the template toolkit logic like that and have it work. I didn't know you could do that.
I'm happy to share my knowledge. Thank you for sharing yours.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I was doing it. Thanks.
And if you're supported by Bywater, definitely, get with them because they can do, they can get you started. Maybe they can do all of it for you. They can get you started. I learned some. I don't know as much as Lisette or other people about how it actually works, but I got some code and I could look at the code and then I could start to understand, oh, I see this is coming from this particular place in the code. So that, that was very helpful to kind of start learning a little bit about it.
Hello, this is Janice with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. And we have a whole place print notice created. And if I could get the permissions to share my screen so I can show you, I have a question. I put it in the chat, but I just want to show you all what I'm talking about.
You should be able to share. Barbara, you might need to stop your sharing.
Have I stopped? You are sharing here. There it is. Did I get it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you should have the option down at the bottom of the screen. Janice, to share your. There you go.
Can you all see the call slip?
Yeah.
Okay. Before we were on Koa, we were on Ex Libris Olive, and we had a call slip that sort of looked like this. And so we wanted to kind of stay with that format. And so we moved to Koa in 2011. And it started out being a cron job, I think. I was not in this position at the time. And then as Koa, upgraded and added features, we asked for, could this be done? And so we paid for development for this to be created. But as Lisette was talking and she was showing her screen, hers is under email, but are you sending an email or is it just being printed out?
For the hold notice, we just send an email.
Okay.
And then for the hold slips, it gets printed, but it is under the email. And
Okay.
I don't remember why it does it that way.
Okay. Well, that was my question, because ours, it prints out. We are archived, so nothing leaves our building. So when they place a hold, it prints the slip, and then we have a barcode scanner and we scan the barcode and it checks it out to the patron. And then at the end of the day, or when they're finished with the item, we rescan and it checks it back in. But sometimes when we upgrade, it breaks our call slip and the call slip doesn't print and they have to go in and do some maneuvering and some changes. But I never know exactly what it is that broke it, and they really can't tell me either. So I didn't know if it being under email was the problem, because we're not sending emails at all, it's just being printed. If it needed to be moved under print. And our next upgrade is coming up in November, and so.
It's a weird thing with Koha that the hold slips, the template that builds the hold slips has to be in the email section of that. And if you put something in the print, in the box that says print and leave the email one blank, you get nothing.
Okay.
My experience, we asked, apparently long before I started to work here, we had Bywater add some specific fonts to our system, some non-standard fonts that weren't part of the Koha package. And the experience we've had is that a couple of times during an upgrade, our fonts haven't also been included in the package. And so our custom fonts have been overwritten by the default fonts, and we've had that break some of our print notices and receipts. And so that might be the experience you're having, is that somebody might have installed some custom fonts in your system. That'd be my guess, but I'm not sure because I don't have enough knowledge. So
Okay, thank you.
And I know when we were doing our testing, I would preview it and, I would see it on the screen and it would be a sans serif font. And that's basically what we wanted. And then it would basically print in Times New Roman, and that's not what we wanted. And Lucas had to go in and do a bunch of stuff. And I think we do have some kind of a custom font in there to make it print the way we wanted. So I'll be interested to see if the upgrade breaks that.
Okay, thank you.
I mentioned in the chat, it sent chills down my spine when you said ex libris. I hate those words. So
That was a long time ago.
So it is 10 o'clock. Did you guys catch all the questions in the chat? Are there any that you want to hit real fast? Or we're not strictly stuck to the schedule if George doesn't care, because we do have a big open space after George's presentation, but before lunch. So
I am a fountain of apathy as far as starting on time goes.
So I'm just scrolling back up through. I did see Lauren asked about where do you map fields to use them in the template toolkit. So I think that's going to be the same place we were kind of talking. You can't see my face. Okay. We were talking about the cataloging sig yesterday, you have to do the koha mark mapping. So if you check that out in your administration, if your number is mapped to part number and your name is mapped to part name, whatever field subfields those are, then I would assume, again, I haven't used Template Toolkit at all, but I would assume you'd be able to pull those out with Template Toolkit using those database fields. One thing to note there is it's not retroactive. So like Barbara was saying, they had to reindex, they probably had to go in and tell Koha to populate those fields, back populate them. So if you don't have something mapped, you may need to go into the database and kind of back populate the data. Like moving forward, it will populate, but stuff that's already in Koha doesn't know to refresh unless you like go in and save each record, which is not something you want to spend your time doing. So, and then I think Daniel asked if there was a bug surrounding the formatting on the notices. And Barbara, you're in Bugzilla the most, I think. Do you know?
I don't know of one. It's not one I've come across, I guess.
I did a quick search. It looks like they're doing some work to try and simplify the use of Template Toolkit in the notices, like explain the syntax better, maybe add a more librarian-friendly editor, that sort of thing. So that looks good to me. But yeah, I didn't see anything as far as that specific issue.
Yeah.
But it might be something to try and suss out and file.
I'll make one last comment because it sounds like the questions are winding down. Lisette mentioned it's a good idea to make a backup of your notices before you start breaking all of them. I actually, we have a ton of notices and slips in our system. So there's a GitHub link in the chat that's I make a backup every couple of months of all our notices and slips. And if you go to that site and click on the link for instructions, there's instructions of how to make a backup. Essentially, I run a report that outputs all of the notices and slips into a CSV file. And then I use a VBA macro to pump all of that into another folder to make a backup of everything at once. It's pretty quick. So
I'd like to add to what George said, make a backup of anything before you start messing with it in Koha. I've broken so many different things, but it was always nice because I wasn't working on the production model.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Fred.